Welcome to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the place where you can learn how to create a dental practice and a business life that you love. Listen in with Dr. David Moffet as he interviews successful entrepreneurs and successful business people and successful dentists as they share their business successes, their stories, and their breakthrough ideas. Sharing pearls of wisdom that you can take back to your practice and implement immediately so that you can have that great practice with more patients, higher profits, and less stress. This is the podcast where great dental practices meet with successful business processes. Thanks for tuning in to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the podcast where thought leaders, industry experts, and thriving practice owners reveal their very best tips, tools, and strategies that will help you to grow your dental practice faster. Now, here's your host, Dr. David Moffet.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. David Moffet. I'm in Burrowang, New South Wales in Australia, and gives me great pleasure today to welcome somebody who's also on the east coast of Australia, up in sunny Queensland on the Sunshine Coast, Keith Abraham. Keith,
Hey,
welcome
David.
to the studio. Nice to have you here.
Thank you, buddy.
Yeah.
Appreciate the opportunity to hang out with you.
No, it's good. And as we've just been chatting for 20 minutes beforehand, as usually happens before we hit the record button. But I was telling Keith that I first saw him speak in about 1996, which must have been when he first started professional speaking. He is now chalking up 30 years. He's, as we mentioned, I told him that he was mentioned at the New South Wales Professional Speakers of Australia meeting last week. And I asked, do you consider him the godfather or the grandfather? And it was voted unanimously that he is the godfather of Australian speaking.
For
So,
that. Thank
yes.
goodness for that, mate. Wow, that's an esteemed title.
Yes.
They just give it to people who've been hanging around longest. So I think it might be that.
Well, I guess sometimes that is the case, isn't it, in certain professions? If you hang around long enough, you end up at the top of the pile. But Keith, it's a well-earned title for you. You've always been an inspiration to me since the first time I saw you. I like your stuff. I like how you help other speakers. And I think that today you're going to be able to share a lot of good information for dentists and dental business people, because that's what my podcast is trying to do, is trying to help dentists think outside the box. And somebody told me that don't think outside the box. There is no box.
Wow. There's a difference.
So I'd never heard that. They attributed it to somebody, and I looked it up, and it goes back a couple of hundred years, actually. So
Really?
It's, I don't know why it got dropped, but yeah, there is no box. When there's no box, there's no limit, is there? But
Correct.
Keith, let's talk. You talk now. You're the goal guy. You know, I saw you're the creator of Goal Driver, and you're a big talker on goals, which we'll come back to.
Yes.
But before you became a speaker, and I love this story because you used to be a council weed expert. Was that your title? What was your title?
No, I was I was a noxious weed inspector.
That's it.
So I had a council vehicle. I used to travel at 100 kilometres an hour down the Gold Coast Highway looking for noxious weeds. Didn't find too many at that speed, but that's what I did. That was one of, the first job was in the council as in water supply and sewage, but I was motivated to get out of sewage and work my way up to the prestigious position of noxious weed inspector. So, and my mum got me that job too, I might add, David. It was graft and corruption back in those days at the highest level. She was she had a lot of influence in the council. She was a tea lady. So back in the day when you used to wheel the trolley around with two urns, one with tea and one with coffee and a few biscuits. And I suppose if you gave her son a job, you got a couple extra ice Vovos and a Tim Tam on a Friday. So that was how I started my working career in the council.
Yeah, as a person who lives on the land with acreage, I am concerned with weeds. And
Mm.
a friend of mine used to do a community radio show in Sydney, and he used to have a guy actually present a humorous section, Weed of the Week. So I became an expert from listening to him and his humorous descriptions of certain weeds. So I can understand that there is a science to it, and it's not, I guess you downplay that at 100 kilometres an hour, you're not going to see many, but I often tell my wife, if you see something flowering in the bush, it's a weed. It's not a flower, because weeds always win in the bush, and that's usually the case. They attract birds,
Mm.
and that's how they spread the weed.
Yeah.
But let's jump now 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
I love your track record, Keith, as a speaker. 96% client repeat and referral rate. Let's talk about that, because as dentists don't have their 96% of their patients coming back. So that's a very, very important thing. And I know that you are the king of follow-up. From hearing
Yeah.
you speak through speakers, telling them that you've got to follow up and follow up and follow up. And I remember you telling a story about somebody like 17 years of follow-up before they
Yeah.
finally booked you.
Yeah.
So tell
I
us
will.
some of your journeys there.
Well, I'm just, the first book I wrote was Creating Loyal, Profitable Customers. And the reason why I wrote that book is lots of people, and me included, I was talking about customer service at the time. I was talking about sales, but, lots of people talk about how to find them, how to sell to them, but not too many people talked about how to keep them. And so I just got on a real personal journey to say, I'm just going to stay in touch with my clients, and I'm going to make sure that I'm top of mind, and I'm going to add value to them on the way so I'm their first best choice. And I think one of the things that we have to be really conscious of now in a society where we have a lot of tech and a lot of databases and applications and communication tools and everything like that is it does come back to a connection, but it comes back to a connection where you add unprecedented value to your customer and you give them a reason to return. I always think that the measure of any great service experience, regardless of whether you're a professional speaker or a dentist or whoever it may be, is does your client return and do they recommend? See, my belief is that when a client returns, you have sustainability. When they recommend, you have profitability. And so the real essence then is it comes back to a couple of questions. And I think this is one question that most of us don't ask with enough depth is how do we want our clients to feel? And of course, as a dentist, there's pain involved sometimes and there's a reluctance and everything like that. But the question you got to ask yourself is how do you want your patients, your customers, your clients, how do you want them to feel? And the thing that we know, and we just loop back in with a little bit of gold driver information, the thing that we know is that of the 135 different emotions an adult can experience, 64 of them are positive. Of those 64, they break down into 8, and I call them gold drivers. These are the drivers that people will pursue an emotion because that's what they seek out. And what we do know is that people want to feel successful. People want to feel purposeful. People want to feel inspired. People want to feel happy. People want to feel in control. People are organized. People want to feel respected. People want to feel confident, and people want to feel relaxed. And so the question we've got to ask ourselves is how do we want our customer to feel when they deal with us? That you're a safe pair of hands, that you're the leading expert. And of course, all of those 8 are emotions, but what sits behind that emotion is a driver. And the driver, am I going into too much detail, David? By the way, I'm sort of, I jumped into a fair bit of content here. Is that okay? So the thing I'd say is if people want to feel successful, they're driven by progress. If they want to feel purposeful, they're driven by legacy. If they want to feel inspired, they're looking for impact. If they want to feel happy, they're driven to either give joy or receive joy, help people become more joyful. if they're looking for it to be if they're driven, their emotion is organized, then they're driven to feel in control. They're driven by, if their driving emotion is that they want to feel respected, it's about mastery. If it's if it is they want to feel confident, then they are really driven by self-love. And if they want to feel relaxed, they're driven by being in flow, that things are a little bit more effortless. So, we have to understand, how do you want your customer to feel?
It's an important thing because, and I hate to categorize dentists because that's what they do, but they're made up of a multitude of
Oh,
different
absolutely, yeah.
personalities. So categorize, but they tend to be very detail focused, like school
Yeah.
teachers and engineers,
Mm,
female school teachers and engineers. And so they forget that there's actually a human being on the end of the teeth. The other thing that dentists, they just get used to being rejected as they work. And dentistry is, one of my speaking mentors in customer service said, dentistry is the ultimate grudge buy, more than tires. People
yes.
they want to get a bit more miles out of their tires, but dentistry, they just want to put it off. They don't want to go at all. And so
Yes.
you've got to get over that hurdle. And to be
Mm,
successful, you've got to make the doing of the dentistry really inconsequential in the visit. It's more about the personalities and the respect and that you give people and make them feel valued and make them feel
mm,
understood and not taken for granted, as you said. And so it's important to break it down as you just explained into how can we make this more about a relationship, a friendship between dentist and customer rather than a transaction. Because as
yeah.
soon as you lose the friendship, it's all about price. And then that's just a race to the bottom for everybody.
Yeah, 100%. And the thing that you've got to understand is, with all dentists, what they need to do is they got to go, there's 4 areas. What do we do before a patient, a customer ever turns up? What are we doing to create an experience that's memorable, repeatable, remarkable, referable? What do we do during? So the during is, they walked over your lease line into your practice, and therefore, whatever, a clean, a fill, a drill. What do they say? Clean fill drill, and so they're there for that, or they're there for for something that's a little bit more major than that, braces on kids or whatever. So that's the during. Then what do they do after? What happens during that 30 days after that visit to the dentist? What are you doing to create an experience that's memorable, repeatable, remarkable, remarkable? And then what do you do forever after? And, what are you doing to create a conversation, that people want to repeat, people want to refer to, people want to keep on sharing with other people? So that's the piece of the puzzle that they've got to get their head around. A lot of people just are thinking about the moment they walk in the door, somebody's there to greet them, and then the moment they walk out of the door, and make sure we've itemised the bill and that sort of stuff. So I just think that one of the things that people need to do is really get crystal clear on before, during, after, and forever after.
Right. So, Keith, I was actually talking to a client today on a similar question, a dental practice, and they were talking about a patient who was leaving, who had been a patient for only 2.5 years, but a very loyal patient, had spent a bit of money with them, and he was
Mm.
leaving because he'd inherited a property in Tasmania and he was moving to Tasmania. And they said they wanted to give him a gift. And I said, I think that's a very noble thing to be giving him a gift when the likelihood of him ever reappearing as a patient is probably very slim. And so they thought, he's moving to Tasmania. He might be setting up a winery because he's bought a property. They wanted to give him a vine. I said, well, chances of you getting a vine into Tasmania, next to nothing. They said, he's a cyclist. I said, what I'd do, I'd go and buy him a cycling top. Because if he likes cycling, every time he puts that on and it's got a bit of a Queensland flavour, he'll remember that you or practice
Mm.
gave it to him. But more importantly, what I said to them is, you're going to be giving without ever thinking that you're ever going to receive anything back. And often
Correct.
people only give if they think they're going to get something back. So this is good for you to be looking at this relationship that you may never see him again. He may still have friends up here that he will talk about to them, but basically it's a zero return for you, but it gets you in that giving mode. And I think that's going to be good, because I want you then to start looking at your other patients and saying, what can we give them? And these are people who have probably been coming longer, might have spent a bit more. Looking at those, the top 20%. It's the and you'd know it. The top 20% of your clients give you 80% of your income, and you just keep in dentistry. It's the same, repeat business all the time. And we're talking about our friend Jack Daly, and he was telling me about an event he did recently where the client, it was like the 11th year in a row, and they wanted him to come and speak. He goes, "Oh, really?" He said, "Oh, the tank's pretty empty." And they said, "No, one more time." So he said, "All right." He said, "I think there was 300 sales people in this conference." He said, "I want to see the top 10%, the top 10 salespeople." So they got them up on stage. Of the top 10, seven of them had never worked in that industry up to a year ago, and had never worked in sales. And they were in the top 10%, these 7. And so he asked them what they did, and you'll love this. He asked them, "What did you do? How did you learn it?" You know what they all said? "I just followed the playbook." So again, that's the success in a lot of businesses, is that you can find the path that you need to find has already been trodden by somebody else. And when you find that person as a coach or as a mentor, just do what they tell you to do. And so there's that advice that you're telling people about: follow up and respect them as customers and make them feel valued and important, as opposed to just transactional. If you treat them transactionally, you'll always be chasing dollars. If you treat them as a human being, you'll never be chasing dollars, because the money will flow.
Yeah. One of the things there, David, is I said before, during, after, and forever after. And the forever after is the piece that people go, well, what would I do, after 30 days? And I think, what I'd be doing as a dentist, I would first be going back through my whole database, and this should all be in their systems, is when did they become a customer? And you almost want to go, let's celebrate people that have been with us for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, longer. Let's celebrate the first year anniversary, or the second year anniversary, or whenever they're a little bit, maybe they start, that's when they get a little shaky and perhaps want to move somewhere else. But the other thing I'd be saying to you as well is the key to doing this is you've got somebody in a chair for 30 minutes to an hour. We should, and the clinician should take the time to sort of go, oh, they're interested in cycling, or they love gardening, or they're into this, or they got a trip planned to Italy, or they're da-da-da-da-da. And perhaps the forever after gift is personalized in such a way that they go on Amazon and go, here's a book about Tuscany because they're going to Tuscany. Here's a voucher to your local cycle store, to buy your next jersey. Like build in a piece of that puzzle, and maybe it's 1%. Like you sort of go, well, what would be a 1%? What would be a 1%? Value around it. So it could be one of those things. Let's say they spend $1,000. What's 1%? What's 5%? And that's the surprise and delight.
Very much so. Dentists are dreadful at that, because you go for your checkup and every 6 months, and they'll give you a little brown paper bag with a cheap, nasty toothbrush and a tiny little bit of floss and a tiny little free giveaway of toothpaste. And you go, oh, here's my $300 bag of nothing, because that's what you paid for your checkup and clean. And I love that you've done some homework and surprised them. One of the things that I teach all my dentists is that after every appointment, there are 10 steps, 10 things that they need to say to the patient. The first 5 are clinical. The first 2 are about what did they have done and what are they going to feel? And then the next 3, very important, what are we doing next time? When are we going to do it? And what will happen if you don't get it done? And that puts the urgency and concern and locks that in. Then the next 5, the last 5, all very important, and dentists don't do this. Thank them for their time today. Thank them for being a great patient, all right,
Yeah.
and how much you enjoy working on them. Wish them good health until you see them next time, and not just look after yourself, but, you really mean it. Look them in the eye and say it, and
Well,
then look for an above and beyond experience that you can give them. And then the last one is there something that they've mentioned, a future event that you can say, by the way, let me know how that movie is that you're going to go and see, or let me know how that dinner party goes, or let me know how that golf game's going to go. Something that you've picked up in that conversation. So it's more than just open wide, close, see you later, which a lot of them just do. So having that routine and repeating that every patient will grow your practice base, because like you said, it's all about connection and treating them as someone important. And often in your case, it's not the MD who signs the order to have you come and speak, but it might be somebody on his staff who says, oh, this guy Keith, he's just given me this, he's just sent that, he's just done this. And so you're actually impressing the whole team as well.
Yeah, for me, buddy, and I think this is something we can all sort of go back to. I know it sounds a bit old-fashioned, but old-fashioned is new again, is write them a handwritten note. Thanks very much for coming in today. We're so grateful that you put your health in our hands. And on behalf of the team, we say, appreciate you being a customer now for more than 3 years. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. Regards, Keith. It'll take you 65 seconds to write that note, and somebody can put it in an envelope and send it out, and it's done. Oh, we'll send them an email with that. No. That means nothing. You can automate that. You can customize, we could plug that in and we could have that as part of our system and everything like that. And no, that's the point. The point is, geez, Keith, I'd be writing 100 notes a month. Yep.
3 a day.
And by the way, that will probably jump to 200. But let me because people go, because here's the question. I'm doing this at the moment. I'm sending out books with a handwritten note. And the reason why I'm doing it is everyone can type an email. In actual fact, I didn't even have to type an email anymore. I can push one button on my computer and I can use Whisper and go, "Hi, David. Great chatting with you today on your podcast. Really appreciate the opportunity to be part of the podcast and talk to you about my new book called Unstoppable Velocity." I can just push the button under, it's done, send. So and it'll transcribe it perfectly, blah, blah, blah. And, but the one thing we've got to understand is, there's not a conference I haven't been at this year where people have talked about AI. And I think the real competitive edge moving forward is AI plus AI. And what I mean by that is artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence is going to do 3 things for it. It's going to save you money, make you money, or help your people become more productive. On the other side, the other AI is authentic individuals, because the more we go down an artificial path, the more we have to be more authentic. And authenticity is the currency of credibility. And I can write a handwritten note and that person knows that I have written that note, or somebody in my team has written that note. We haven't had a computer do it. It's been done. And, mate, my age, I've always written with a great pen. My first, the first job I got, I went and bought a great pen. When I'd been in business for myself, I bought this pen. This is a Waterman pen. It's a fountain pen. I can write in an aircraft with it. It doesn't lose its, pressure doesn't make ink go everywhere, and so I'm old fashioned, but old fashioned is the new trend.
I love it. I learned to write at school with an inkwell and a nib pen, but I had a disability at school, and that was being left-handed. I just changed everything, so I hated ink pens for that reason. But I do understand the value. I've got a client, convinced them to do what we did in my practice, which was every Christmas we sent over 700 Christmas cards. And they said, "Oh, can't we just get them printed with everybody's name on it?" I said, "No." I said, "Get everybody to sign them." And they say, what, 700? I said, I did it one day, one Christmas. It took me 45 minutes. Set the stopwatch. Off I went. I said, I'm glad my name was David and not Rodriguez. It would
Yeah,
have been
right.
twice as long. But I got them all done. And then she said, oh, what about putting just labels on the envelope? No, handwrite, find the person with the neatest writing, put handwritten envelopes. More stamps, the better. Small stamps, more stamps, the better. And a return address on the back. A sticker? No, return address. I said, you handwrite everything. And they go, oh. And I tell this story because I had a husband and wife, they had different surnames. And they used to joke because we'd send them out in batches so the postman wouldn't say, oh, gee, 700 Christmas cards in one go. And they'd joke who got theirs first. And she said, last year Graham didn't get one. I said, I better fix that. This was July. So I found one from the previous year. I put it in the mail in July. Graham got his the first way before she did. But again, have some fun with it as well. Sometimes they said, with the birthday cards, because I used to send birthday cards to long-standing patients, and they said, one person said, you're the only person who sends me a birthday card.
Yeah.
So we make their day. We're getting a bit starfish story now, but it did make their day. So you're right. It's important. And it's the little things that make the big difference, and easy to do, easy not to do means do it.
Easier not to do, mate. It's easier not to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So do it. Always, because the return on it is important. Now, Keith, you've mentioned your book.
Yes.
Unstoppable Velocity.
Yes.
That unstoppable velocity, that's permanent velocity. There it is.
There it is.
Turn your goals into a reality faster.
Yeah. This is about goal achievement, though. Everyone talks about goal setting, but this is about goal achievement. We've done, close to 20 years of research on what helps people achieve their goals faster, easier, sooner, which really is about how do you shorten the distance between you and your goal. And that is a competitive edge, or it's a personal edge as well, that you can apply to anything, whether it be your business or your personal life or your health or your finances. It's really getting people crystal clear on it, because everybody knows how to set a goal, but, how do you actually make it come true? So the book has been just come out last week, and if people want a copy, they can go to unstoppablevelocity.com and buy it from the website, and I sign it and do all that sort of stuff. You can get it on Amazon as well, but it's one of those, it's a combination of all the research that we've done around what drives people, what emotionally drives people, what mentally drives people, what physically drives people to achieve their goals, because when you have those three elements, people become committed, compelled, and connected to do it. And why do you need that? Because what sits in front of every goal is it's uncomfortable, it's inconvenient, and it's sometimes unknown what to do. And so the thing I've been talking to people a lot about recently, which comes out of the book, is before your goal is action, then you achieve your goal, but it's what's beyond the goal. And I say to people, what's beyond the goal is abundance, because when here's my definition of abundance. It's more of. Every goal should be giving you more of something. And that in itself could be an emotion. I feel successful. That itself could be something that is mental. My belief builds, my confidence builds, my persona, how I carry myself builds, or it could be something physical. I've achieved this target in my business, and this has been able to help me put a down payment on a holiday home, or a great holiday for my family, or my kids going to a better school, something physical. So when you start to apply authenticity, abundance, and then alignment, so this goal is actually aligned with my values, with my purpose. This goal is aligned with my belief that I feel like I'm worthy, deserving, and capable of it. Then when you apply those three elements, you create acceleration. And that's how you shorten the distance between you and your goal, because that's velocity, speed, direction, and focus is what comes out of those three A words.
So let's get down to the nitty-gritty on goals, Keith, because you know the stats. Is it 3% of people actually have goals that they've written down and they read every day? That's the message out there, and that in itself, just having them written down and reading them every day helps them achieve them. And I like to put alongside that is that the insurance industry statistics that 95% of people are either dead or broke at the age of 65, and there's got to be something similar. The 5% that are well off or wealthy are probably include the 3% that write their goals. That's pretty logical sort of thing, yeah. But one of the things with goals that I've found an issue is there are so many parts of your life, and setting goals in each of those parts and then having multiple goals, all of a sudden you end up overwhelmed by how many goals you have. Is there an ideal number to focus on?
So here's what I believe. You want to have 100 goals you want to achieve in your lifetime. You want to have, so goals fit into 3 categories or time frames. You've got macro goals. That's the 100 things you want to achieve in your lifetime, the 20 things you want to do this year. You have mono goals, and mono is if you could just achieve one thing this year, what would be your big, bold goal that would be year defining? Could be ticking that thing off that you've been talking about for the last 10 years. And then you have micro goals. And they're the things that you do, which are in essence come down to some daily habits, those things that feel like a micro win. So the thing I say to people is have 100 things you want to achieve in a lifetime, because that gives you a vision for the future, something to always look forward to. Have 20 things you want to do this year, little things, big things, things that give you joy, things that you do with your family. And then identify a big, bold goal. A goal that you say, if when I achieve this, I will have had an absolutely unbelievably fantastic year. And it could be a physical goal, it could be a personal goal, it could be a professional goal, or it could be a personally profitable goal for you. And then so come down and say, let me have micro wins. Let me win the day. I know for myself, and like you, I win the day when I get up early, I meditate, I journal, I go for my 10K walk run in the morning. I have a swim in the ocean, come back and have some breakfast, and I then work on the 3 things I want to achieve in my business that day. They're my micro wins because they're my habits. And I'm a great believer in 3s as well. What's 3 for the day, 3 for the week, 3 for the month, 3 for the quarter?
I like the 3 because it's all through history. The 3 wise men, the 3 blind mice,
Yeah.
the 3
Well,
monkeys.
it's not overwhelming. Like on my list at the moment, I've got probably about 15 things to do. But I go, I'm never doing 15 things unless I do the 3 most important. I'm never going to accelerate. I'm never going to create velocity if I'm not doing the 3 most important things for the day.
I really like that, Keith, and I'm leading to the fact, our good friend Taki Moore, he tries to get people to do 1 or 2 things only, and now it's only 1. Every time he does a 6-week training or an 8-week training, whatever it is, 6 weeks on, 2 weeks off, he says, just do 1 thing. He said, because if you get that done in that 6 weeks, 8 times a year, you've achieved 8 things for the year. Whereas if you've got 2 or 3 each time, sometimes you don't get anything done for the whole year because you're juggling balls.
Well, you're the plate spinner in the circus, David. You've got this plate going, then you get that plate going. Oh, I better go back and get and you divest your energy across so many different things that you think you're being ultra productive. Where that's why I say this comes out of Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy's book, 10x is easier than 2x. What they say is that, if you were going to 10x your business, when you really start thinking about 10xing your business, it's not 20 things that you have to do to make it 10 times better. It's 1 thing. But if you want to increase your business by 5%, you go, I've got to do this better, I've got to do this better, I've got to do this and this and this. No, just come back to what's the 1 thing? What's that 1 thing that'll give you the greatest amount of acceleration that will make all the other sticking points seem insignificant?
It's a 10x became a cliche, but I think that book, and you've reminded me to go and reread it, 10x is easier than 2x, really sums it up in terms of focus, because 10x, you can just say, it can just be too broad. So I like that. I hope my viewers and listeners on this podcast get that book, because Dan Sullivan's very big in the coaching world. Business world, he's a guru. Yeah. And so many people who I've seen go through. Yep.
Him and Dr. Benjamin Hardy wrote a trilogy. So there's 3 books. One is called The Gap and the Gain, which is a good book. But the 2 books that I've read over and over and over and over again is X is easier than 2X, and the other is Who, Not How. Because once you understand what your 10X goal is, the thing that comes up for you is, well, how do I do that? Wrong question. Who can help me do that? Who can help me do it? Who can I delegate it to? Who can I learn from? Who can be my mentor? Who's done it before me because they've learned all the ways I not how to do it? And that's what you do for your listeners. That's what you do for your clients that you consult to, that you coach, is that you go, hey, listen, I've seen this work with this practice and here and here and here. I've used it in my own practice. And, don't go and try and reinvent the wheel. Follow the bouncing ball. Follow what people have done. Put your flavor and your flair and your exponential, overlay on it. But follow a pathway that other people have done to move yourself forward faster.
Taki Moore said it in something I was watching of his yesterday, where he said people don't need more information. They all they need is who's going to help them.
Yeah, you just need more.
Yes, exactly. So again, viewers and listeners, do what Keith said. Not more information.
Yeah.
Isn't that called? The people go and they take notes. They put it on their shelf. That's called shelf help.
Yes. I haven't heard that before, but I love it.
That's all it is.
That's very good.
Use that.
I will use
as Winnow says, I heard my friend David Moffet say this, and then the next time, as I have said before, and then as I've always said. But it's true. If you can just focus on one thing at a time, and it comes back. I think Simon Bowen said we're throwing names at each other. Simon Bowen said, if you can do it and you can teach other people to do it, then it's proven. If somebody can't do it, the answer isn't you or the other people. It's them and them in their. I say, if you've got a problem, walk into your bathroom, you'll find the answer to the problem in their bathroom. They go, what? I go, that big shiny silver thing, just look in that. There's the answer to your problem. Yeah. It's you. You're not doing something that you should be doing. That's usually it. Or you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%, mate. I just think
find the help.
Yeah. Yeah, I look, and the reason why most people don't find who's is they don't humble themselves enough to sit at the feet of a master. There's six ways to accelerate the probability of you achieving your goal. And those 6 ways, look very much like this, mate. And I'll just sort of, the first piece of the puzzle that most people have got to understand is that people are 10%, the probability of people achieving their goal increases by 10% if they have their goal written down. And my thing around this is that you've got to have it written down as a story with as much detail as possible. People have 4 types of goals. They have vague goals. Hey, David, I know I've got to achieve something this year. I just don't know what it is. Okay, that's vague. People got fuzzy goals. The fuzzy goals are, well, it could be greater profitability or it could be higher revenue. I'm just not sure which is vague. That's fuzzy. And then you got people who have got specific goals. Well, I want to increase my profitability by 15%. I want to increase my revenue by 110,000, and I want to have X amount of more customers and new customers, and I want to increase my practice by another partner, and that's pretty specific. But then what really we're looking for is the story. I'm going to grow my business by 1,000 new customers, and 50% of them will come from referrals because of a service experience that is so good. People rave about it relentlessly to their friends and family. And I'm going to empower my people in my team to create an experience, not just deliver a service. And I'm going to be able to create a service experience that's memorable, repeatable, referable, and remarkable. And they tell a story, and as they read that, they get enthused by it, they get energized by it. That's what we want people to do. So you got to have it written down. It goes up to 20% if you're consciously focused on it. In other words, you read it on a regular basis every day or every other day. It goes up to 40% probability if you have a specific date that you want to achieve it by. So now you've got it written down, you're reading it regularly, you got a deadline because, by the way, Dave, what's the most productive day of the year? The day before you go on holidays. Why? Because you go to work with a list. It jumps up to 50% probability if you have a plan on how to achieve it. You don't have to have it mapped, 100 steps mapped out, but you have to have a plan. You have to have some milestones. It jumps up to 60% if you tell somebody about it. And it jumps all the way up to 90% if you lock in an accountability appointment with a mentor or a coach every month where they hold your feet to the fire. That's why people achieve their goals better than anybody else. Why? Because they have an accountability coach.
So important to be accountable.
Vital.
And I don't know whether you've found it in dentistry. What I find is that because they've been smart enough to get into dental school, and then they think they're smart enough to get through dental school, and they're smart enough to buy a business, they think they're smart enough to work things out by themselves. And I know that in my business, when I flatlined for 4 years, I think the first 5 years I grew, then the next 4 I flatlined, and people said, they said, Dave, you're doing double what the average dentist is. Don't worry, you're doing double. And I'm going, there's space in my book. I could be doing better. And so I've met a guy who was doing double what I was doing. And I go, he's no better than me. What's he doing? And you know what it was? He had a coach. And so I hired his coach. Didn't work. Then I hired another coach, 6.5 years, tripled my business in that 6.5 years. So, the answer, the accountability coach is, what does a coach do for you? Keeps you accountable. Make sure that you do.
They're not giving you they're getting you to think differently, but they're not giving you, apply this strategy. Nobody else is doing this and this will make you, 3 times better. No. They're just holding your feet to the fire. You said you were going to do this, David. Have you done it? Oh, got busy. Hey, David, who's not busy, mate? So that's an excuse. That's not a reason. And they go, okay, I'm struggling with, getting my people to buy into it. Okay, well, have you tried this and this and this? Oh, no, I hadn't thought of that. Okay, great. That's what a coach does for you. My business grows because I have 3 groups of people in my business. I have a personal mentor, somebody I'll talk to about life, universe, and everything else. I have a business mentor, someone I share my goal to, and they bounce ideas around with me. And then I have a forum group with 6 other business leaders in it that I meet with every month virtually. And on the 3rd month, we get together for a couple of days physically to share what we've learned, share what's not working, share where we're stuck, celebrate wins. And every other day every day we're in our WhatsApp group sharing, hey, anybody heard, know how to do this? Look, I'll just come across this great bit of software. And so those 3 groups of people have helped me accelerate my business. But here's the key. I've humbled myself enough to sit at the feet of masters, say, show me, teach me, help me. If I think I know it all, I am, and this goes for everybody, you are upside down, inside out, and all stuffed up, and you don't even realize it.
You just reminded me, the first time I met Winston Marsh, he was a facilitator at a group of dentists that a dentist client of his had got together a $1 million round table for successful dentists. In fact, that guy rang me and said, I know a few people in Victoria, but I've heard you know a few people in New South Wales. Can you help me fill this room? So we got 40 dentists in this room, and I was sitting next to a guy who was taking copious notes as we were going round the table, and everybody was giving 3 tips. Then they went round, this is after the end of the second day, they went round and asked people, what their production was in their practice, and everyone's giving these numbers. And then we went to this guy. He was doing 3 times what the next bloke was doing. Like there were some high numbers, and then he was doing 3. And he was writing down. He would have had writer's cramp from the writing, just like you said, learning from things that he might have forgotten about.
Yeah, you used to do it, stopped doing it, don't know why they stopped doing it. Work's a treat.
Work's a treat. So, there's always opportunity to learn and be reminded. Sometimes as a coach, I find out about my clients that they've snuck something in that I've disagreed with. I said, where did this come from? I said, can you just check this? Okay, I go, get rid of it. Why are you doing that? Again, they thought, I thought it might have been helpful. I said, no, No, it's
No,
not. It's not keeping you on the green line.
that's right. You've got to be in this corridor of clarity, not the chasm of confusion, David. That's what a coach does for you.
You and your alliteration, Keith. You should change one of your names so you've got
Hey,
alliteration in your initial. Maybe
uh,
like that boxer. What was his name? James Bone Crusher Smith. Otherwise, he'd just be Jim Smith. But he put the Bone Crusher in, and so everyone
yeah,
feared him.
exactly,
I
exactly.
think I'll take 5% on that one. Yeah, Keith,
Too kind.
you back to your credentials as we
Yeah,
start to wind this up. You're a multi-award winning professional speaker, Hall of Fame. That's some achievement. That is some
yeah,
really big achievement. Yeah. So why should people take? We should have put this at the front, but why should people take your advice? Well, so many people have, and
yeah,
you've worked for. People say, well, who have you worked for? And I love your Harley Davidson story. You
yeah.
know,
Yeah. I mean, mate, I've been doing this now for 30 years. I have, written 6 best-selling books, 8 in total. The other 2 were very specific for niche markets, and I don't sort of necessarily, include them. I've spoken to 1.7 million people in 43 different countries, and of those 6 books that are bestsellers, they're published in 12 different languages. My business is global. I live on the Sunshine Coast now, and I have clients in Europe that I run 6-month leadership programs for, in UK, in Australia, in New Zealand, and just about to start those in the US. And I suppose, good question. Why should people listen to me? One of my clients said to me once, look, we had a speaker at our event and they weren't very good. So we're reluctant to have a speaker. And I said that's disappointing and it's totally understandable if you're a little gun shy. Um, and I said to him, look, I have 100% money back guarantee. Here's what I guarantee is going to happen. Your people are going to love what I have to say because it's relatable and it's implementable and it's inspirational. But I said, I'm going to walk off the stage. And by the way, you mentioned before, 96% of my clients have used me twice. 64% of my clients have used me at least 6 times. And 31% of my clients have used me every year for 10 consecutive years plus. I will complete, like Toyota and Lexus, for example, they've used me. Of my 30 years in business, I'll do another session with them on this coming Friday. I mean, that's 27 years straight out of the 30. And I got a client Saturday that I'll present to, and this was a client that I'd stayed in touch with them for 16 years before they said yes. But that will be, when I get through these next 2 weekends, that will be their 61st conference I'll run with them in 10 years. And I suppose the thing I always say to people is that if I'm not adding value, and as I said, I've said this before, if I'm not adding value, the real measure of any great speaker is, does the client return and do they recommend? And I suppose if I'm not adding value, they would never employ me again. And I just make it my business to add exceptional, unprecedented value to them, both on stage, at the event, after the event. And I suppose that has, that's held me in very, very good stead, and I've still got clients I'm working with. I think as we shared with you before we jumped on this podcast, people that have been referred to me, people have seen a video, people have, gone to their boss and said, oh, we've got to have this guy. Well, I've never heard of this guy. We'll have a look at this video that he's done. And they go, okay, let's get him to come along. And I think that's the thing that most people have to understand is that, and I heard this on a lovely podcast interview with the guy who set up Ritz-Carlton. And as a 14-year-old in his first hotel, he was working in this hotel restaurant. This was his first job. And his manager said to him, I don't want you to come to work. I want you to come and deliver excellence. And I think, one of the things that I've always strived to do is to deliver an experience and excellence in everything I do. I don't always get it right, by the way, but you don't stay in this industry for 30 plus years or 30 years, I should say, and still not be in adding value and engagement. I often say to people, David, about speakers, I said, speakers never retire. They just stop getting booked. And I'm still getting booked. and I'm still finding new clients, and I'm still loving it, and I feel like I'm just getting started.
Well, kudos to you, Keith Abraham. You are. I introduced you as a legend. The godfather of Australian speaking, and today you've delivered that to my viewers and listeners. So thank you, Keith. If you've mentioned the URL for the book,
Yeah,
unstoppablevelocity.com,
correct. And if people want
please.
to connect with me, they just go to
Yes.
keithabraham.com. So
Yep.
KEITHABRAHAM.com.
It's in my speed dial. I've got it. So I know where you are. Um, Keith Abraham, thank you again today for being a guest on the Ultimate Dental Podcast. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, David, and congratulations on the following that you've got on your podcast, and more importantly, the work that you're doing with dentists to help them build the business of their dreams, not just be a great dentist, but be a great business person running a dentist practice. So hats off to you, buddy.
Thanks very much, Keith. Thank you.